Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone listening today. We would like to thank you and welcome you to this talk this morning. My name is Gemma and I am from InHive. We are coming to the very end of our Enact Festival. For the whole month, we have been having a number of different events, and this is to celebrate 1 year of our Nexus Global Network. So Nexus, we as InHive have been working with networks for young people. We specialize in alumni networks for young people, helping them to get more opportunities. And through that, we realized there's lots of organizations, lots of really amazing positive people who want to make a change, but they didn't have the necessary resources to help pull a network together to do that. So what we did is we created Nexus, which is for any type of network leader, anyone who wants to make change, where they can come together and share resources. And so 1 year of that, we've got over 100 members, and we wanted to be able to celebrate that in a much more open way, to be able to bring more people together and think about how can we make changes through networks. So Beverly, I wonder if you can just share the slides. We just have a quick intro into Nexus and Enact. Sorry, Beverly, are you sharing screen?
Yes, just a second. I'm having some little technical issues.
Sure, no worries. So yeah, basically Enact, we are running it as InHive, but we also have some amazing partners who have been helping us to run this throughout the month. So it wouldn't be possible without all of these collaborators. We would just like to thank them for coming along this journey with us. Why we're doing it? We're doing it because we know that transformational or systems change, as we like to call it, big changes that need to happen in the world, they don't just happen on their own, they happen between us all. And so that's what we want to try and highlight throughout this festival. So it is a month-long festival, and it is for anyone who is a network leader or is interested in any way in building communities or activists for change, and also for funders to help them to understand how can they help these networks create that greater transformational change. And over the month, we've had over 120 speakers from over 30 countries. So it's been a really global event, which has been really exciting. Organizations ranging from education to agriculture to entrepreneurship, and all across and all in between. And throughout the month, all the events are going to be on our YouTube Nexus channel. We've had network stories, we've had network dialogues, we've had some mini technique workshops, we've had pitch practices to real funders giving real advice, and we've had some live problem solving. And then the networks that we've been sort of thinking about is everything from networks for gender, systems change, how do we measure networks impact, how do we improve member engagement. So all of these sessions will be available on our Nexus YouTube channel, so please do take a look at them. But we would like to really be excited for our final keynote speaker of this month-long event. So we have Rana Dajani with us. She is the founder and director of We Love Reading, and we are going to have a conversation today about agency in networks. So welcome, Rana, and thank you so much for coming. And I think we can start with the first question being, what is it that has led you to where you are today?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here to share and also to learn. I'd like to start by greeting everybody in how we greet people in our part of the world. Assalamu alaikum, which means peace upon you all. So my story started a long time ago, and I'm going to tell the story because I think storytelling is part of how we survived as a species. In some points in time, as we evolved, I think I envisioned there were two groups of people. There were a group of people sitting around the fire telling stories, and there was another one that frowned and said, "What? You're wasting your time telling stories." But you can imagine which one of those two groups survived. It was the storytellers. So in the spirit of evolution and storytelling, I'll share with you how I started. So I'm actually a professor of molecular cell biology. I do experiments in my lab and I teach at the university. I work on genetics of ethnic populations and epigenetics of trauma. However, I grew up in an environment with a feeling of responsibility towards my community. And this responsibility also encouraged me to use the knowledge and skills I have in the service of my community. And that stems from my religion and my culture. And therefore, you know, when you go from one place to another, you move or you travel, and then you come back, you see things that you didn't realize. Good things that you appreciate that you didn't appreciate before, and things that are not so good that you should, you know, you think, oh, you know, these should be fixed. And that's when I noticed that children don't read for fun. And I felt that reading for fun is what made me who I am in terms of my imagination, in terms of being able to express myself, understanding others and empathizing. But maybe most importantly, it gave me the courage to be the hero I read about and think, if she was able to do that in the story, then why not me? So that's why I thought if it would be a crime for children not to fall in love with reading, because that's where they unleash their own inner potential and they realize the potential out there in the world. So as a scientist, I applied my scientific thinking and started thinking, okay, so since reading for fun is so important, how do I get these kids to do that? Because traditionally in Jordan, where I come from, reading is more about education, school, so it's boring. It's it's not fun. Although there's a high literacy in Jordan, and I call this part, which is falling in love, is putting the horse before the cart. Because if you fall in love with reading, you fall in love with learning, and you become a lifelong learner, which is so important for the future of education. Since we don't know what education is going to look like, at least we can equip our kids to have that love of learning. And that curiosity, to pique that curiosity that is also innate to keep them going and discovering. And so through research and observations and questioning, I realized that the way to plant the love of reading is by reading aloud, by having a role model, where every parent should be reading aloud to their children, even as early as when the mother's pregnant. But then the question became, so, all right, it's not practical to knock on everyone's door and tell them, you got to read to your kids. And even if I told the government to pass a law, every parent should read aloud, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to. So I thought, I'm going to take responsibility and do what I think is right, because I have the key and I just couldn't sleep. I had to do something. And it's not enough to read to my own kids. I had to do it to the kids around me. And again, this stems from my upbringing as a Muslim, is that you have to try. You know, you're not responsible for the consequences, but you're responsible for what you can do now within your own circumstances, within your own circle. So I told my husband and kids, and we decided to gather the children in the neighborhood and read aloud to them. Stories, fun from the local culture. And that's what we did. It was a Saturday morning back in 2006. I gathered the children and read aloud to them. And the children fell in love with reading. They didn't want to go home. And after I read 2 stories that were very fun, they lined up. And then the second part is they take the stories home, and they became the drivers of reading in their household. So rather than the parent begging their child, oh, come, I want to read to you, and the child running away, it became the other way, where the child was begging their parents, please read to me. Or the child started reading aloud to their own siblings or friends. And from there on, what I described of somebody volunteering to read aloud in the local neighborhood, in the native tongue, to the children, is what We Love Reading is all about.
Wow, thank you. And I think that's so true, because I think when I think about when I was growing up, you're right, like school was just reading books, right? For learning, for trying to pass exams. But if I think about my parents, they did used to read stories. And I think that's what got me into reading. I don't think I would have got into that without somebody else showing me, to read stories and learn. As you say, it takes you to different places, learn about different cultures, different people. So it's a really great way as well to be learning about other people. So I mean, you're saying that one of the challenges obviously was that reading just wasn't for fun, but I mean, were there any other challenges? Are there challenges, for instance, around access to books and the types of reading that children could access?
So the philosophy behind the program is that if you have that inner motivation to want something because it's fun, you will find a way to get to the source, which in this case is a book. And unfortunately, many programs, they do it the other way around. They give away books, but the children don't want them. And if you give something for free and nobody wants it, nobody's going to go pick it up. So I think it's about how do I foster that inner motivation within the child to want to read. But the cool thing is that although this program started out to help children fall in love with reading, what we realized as the program progressed, what happened is I took what I did and turned it into a training program. So now we train volunteers, youth and adults from age 16 to 100, how to read aloud as an art and how to gather the children in their own neighborhood and read aloud to them. I did it actually the first time in the mosque. Other people do it in churches, under the tree, on the stairs of a building, in your home, community center, anywhere. Now, the thing is, we realized was that this program is also for adults, because these adults who started reading aloud to the children suddenly had a purpose in their lives. They became leaders. They discovered their voices literally and figuratively, literally by reading aloud and figuratively by saying, because they're getting all the credit for what they did. The community doesn't know about me or my organization. They only know Mary or Rula, who started the program in her neighborhood. And so she gets all the credit for the success that their children are achieving. So she or he will never quit. And because of that agency, that feeling that this is my program, their program, and they're running it, is what keeps them reading aloud years in the future. And this is what happens. And not just that, as they discover that leadership skills and within them and that self-confidence, that self-awareness, they start thinking, if I can solve this problem in my neighborhood, what other problems in their neighborhood they can solve as well. So many have gone on to create their own NGOs, solve like a problem about climate in their neighborhood. One woman, for example, she would read stories about the environment to the kids. And then there was suddenly the municipality of the city she lived in, there was a report that there was one neighborhood that was cleaner than all the rest. And when they went to investigate, it was hers, and she got an award from the mayor. And that's what keeps her going, fostered that feeling of responsibility and leadership. Others have found better jobs and so on. So We Love Reading became a program for leadership, for social entrepreneurship, for these adults or youth who are reading aloud. Now, these adults or youth are volunteers. We don't pay them. We call them We Love Reading ambassadors. And the cool thing when we started, not just in the community in Jordan, but we started working in refugee communities, because Jordan has so many refugees, whether Palestinian who had to leave Palestine in 1948, me among them. My father had to leave Jerusalem, so I'm actually half Palestinian, or Syrian. My mother's half Syrian from Aleppo. All these waves of refugees came to Jordan, and we wanted to also participate with them. So when we started implementing our program there, many international NGOs told us, how are you going to succeed if you don't pay these volunteers money? They said, it doesn't work for us. And we smiled and we said, you'll see. And we started the training. And now, 7 years later, right, we have these ambassadors still reading aloud on a volunteer basis. And when you go and you interview them and ask them, how come you're doing this without being paid? They say, we're not doing it for the organization. We're doing this for ourselves. This is our community. So this feeling of agency, this is so important. So the spillover here is that We Love Reading became a program for adults to foster that feeling of agency, responsibility that is so important, not just for literacy and reading, but for mental health, because now there's a purpose. So whether it's a cancer survivor who started We Love Reading and was able to keep on going, waking up every morning because she had a purpose, or it's a refugee who suddenly found something she can control in her life rather than being a victim, waiting for some agency to tell her what to do. Or just, a retired grandparent who suddenly feels that they're important again. So We Love Reading is a program for children, for adults, and for the whole community to have a mindset of I can. And that's so important, and that's how we evolved and survived as a species. And it's so important that we can take control of our lives going forward.
Yeah, and like I also really love that bit about the well-being, because it's true, isn't it? It's not just about, you don't just do things, you do things because there's a feeling inside, right? And that's what that well-being is all about, and feeling part of a community. And as you said, that is how we've survived as human beings. We've told stories. That's how we're alive today. That's how we have history. So I think it's a really powerful thing that you've managed to sort of pull together there. And so when we think about, as you mentioned, like the NGOs have tried this, they've tried things like this and it hasn't worked. What do you think the kind of benefits are of being in this type of network compared to, let's say, a government or an NGO run program?
So one of the biggest challenges that any organization or network for that matter struggles with is, how do I get people to be committed? How do I recruit them? How do I keep them? And I think, again, we are putting the cart before the horse. So rather than trying to always think, how can I bring them in? And this is extrinsic motivation, right? I try to lure them, attract them. And it's always going to be a difficult job, because it's the onus is on the organization or the network trying to bring in people. It should be flipped. It should be the other way. It should be that intrinsic motivation that a member wants to be there because they want to, not because they have to. So the way to flip that is by fostering that agency, right? And by finding the people who want to be with you because they want to, not because they have to. And so in our network, we offer the training, right? But it's not imposed on anybody. You can quit whenever you want. So you take the training, right? And after you take the training, you get a certificate that you are that you took the We Love Reading training, and you become a We Love Reading ambassador. Now, this We Love Reading ambassador is something that you take for life, because at minimum, you realize how important reading is. You may start, at least you're reading to your kids, and that's great. That's in itself fantastic. And then you may venture further and start reading to the kids in your building or your family. And you may venture further and start reading to the kids in the wider circle of your neighborhood. Or you become the advocate of We Love Reading and talk about it everywhere, or create your own NGO for We Love Reading in your country. And at any level, nobody is asking you to do it. It's all based on your own intrinsic motivation to want to do it. And if you do, we just ask people to tell us so that we can celebrate with you. The second thing of how people are part of our network is that, so this feeling that they can quit whenever they want, that there's no imposing on them, there's no requirements. When you have the freedom to quit, you never quit. You only quit when you think, I'm going to quit. I don't care what they say. So this is a human psychology, and that's why people have been with We Love Reading for years, and they don't quit. Third, this feeling of I am the program as a person. So, for example, we had a lady in one city in Jordan called Jarash. She had trained with us back in 2014, and she's reading aloud to the children in her neighborhood, to the local villages around her. So last summer, she was actually not last summer, 2 months ago, she was interviewed by a newspaper for, there was a big festival, and she had rented a room and was reading aloud to kids, all on her own accord. So the newspaper interviewed her, and she said, I am We Love Reading. I created We Love Reading in Jarash. My staff called me up and said, oh, Rana, look, she didn't talk about us or the founder. And I said, this is exactly what we want, that she is the owner. She is, because she's the one who created in her own village. And it's that sense. When you have people like that, then those members of the network will keep on with you forever. And one way of also is that these ambassadors, not just are free to quit whenever they want. They feel that they are the program. The way we engage with them is not that I am serving you, or come and report to me, or I track your progress. See, all these words are, and words create mindsets. These words are very condescending. There is a power hierarchy. We don't use them. It's about sharing. It's about storytelling. It's about, you are the program. You are the ones who create the program. Just, could you share with us your feedback? Could you tell us what you're doing? Could you share the struggles and the successes so that we can incorporate it into the next training? So they actually realize that they are the ones who are creating the program. And all these, they may seem little and trivial, but they are the ones that create that mindset for our members of our network. So We Love Reading has spread now to 60 countries, 63 countries around the world. We don't have an office in every country. We don't recruit from every country. This is just word of mouth. That's why we've been called a social movement. And our network of We Love Reading ambassadors are in every country. It ranges from one individual who's reading aloud to a whole NGO that trains people. And we don't pay anyone. We don't do anything. So I think it's flipping it, that the onus in the agency is on the person who is becoming engaged without and has the freedom to quit whenever they want. We have another fantastic story of a Syrian refugee who lives in Zaatari camp in Jordan. She trained in 2014. She is still reading aloud to the kids. She created her own book club. She never finished school. Now she's a teacher. And when she said, how could you put me a teacher when I never finished school? They said, but you know how to read aloud to kids. You know how to engage kids. And recently there's a documentary actually right now being screened, actually yesterday on May 29 at the Mountain View Film Festival. And it's a documentary about this woman's story. Her name is Esma, how reading changed her whole life and took her from being a passive person with no purpose to this empowered young woman who is creating waves of change around the world. And it's called The Storyteller, the neighborhood storyteller. So I urge you to watch it.
Noting it down. I'm actually noting it down, but I'll probably put it in the chat. And actually, I was going to ask you, one of my questions was going to be about like, how do you, because we get asked this a lot in networks. So how do you keep members motivated, right? To keep them engaged in the network. But it sounds like for you, there's two things that are happening. One, you're listening to their feedback and being able to adapt kind of the, as you say, the training to their feedback. But I think the other important thing that I was hearing is storytelling, right? It's about the storytelling. And I wonder, like, I mean, how important is that? And how do you go about collecting and sharing those stories?
So yeah, so we use, the normal avenues and channels of communication. So through social media, through Facebook, through Twitter, through phone calls. And recently we've developed a mobile app where they can share with us their stories. And by the way, this mobile app is it has built-in gamification. So they post, not report, they share that they're reading aloud to the children, and they post pictures. And it shows on a line how they are progressing in a color kind of code fashion. And as they progress, meaning they read more, they earn different kinds of titles from the social entrepreneur, the leader, the change maker, things like that. And it's their own pace. So it's not about competing. Again, it's not a competition. It's not about who can do more than others, who is better than others. It's about each one has her own pace, and she sets her own let's say milestones and works on it. And it's about fulfilling that inner satisfaction that's without feeling a competition. That I think competition is negative. It's all about collaboration. So our dream now is to develop this mobile app further to create a virtual community where people can talk to each other in a peer-to-peer fashion, so that they can share challenges, share success stories, and become, role models for each other. And when I shared this with Esma from the Zaatari camp, she was over the moon, so excited. Oh, so I can talk to Maria in Argentina and we can share. So hopefully this will pick up this coming year, and we will have created this virtual community, which will help not just our network of ambassadors, but by the way, this could be a platform for other virtual for other networks for different purposes as a virtual community.
Yeah, I mean, and technology is such a great way to help connect people, across the globe. And we hear a lot about that. But I think one of the things that we've also noticed with, yes, you can have a platform, but I think some people think the platform is it, right? Like they put the platform up and the network happens. But there's also all the other things that are happening around that are keeping those people engaged. And so one of the questions would be, what advice would you give to others today who are thinking about solving a challenge like this within their society? Like what are the kind of steps that they would go through to get people engaged and to get a program going, and also have that, as you say, that feeling of agency and being able to control it rather than let somebody else tell them how to solve it?
That's a great question. We call it our secret sauce, our magic sauce. And that's why we ask everybody, take our program, add it to your own program. And although ours is for reading, but it's really about feeling this agency and responsibility. So for any program running for hygiene, for food, for health, for education, if you take Wheel of Reading as a accessory, we call it the sugar on the top, you will motivate people to do things because they want to. So how do we do that? I think it's about again, it's about focusing on the person, feeling that agency, and having the freedom to quit whenever they want. Now, what are the challenges? Your question was, what other challenges, or how can we motivate them? So the thing starts with thinking within yourself, as you go around in your daily life, what bothers me? So we start from there. What bothers you? Anyone this morning, when you woke up, you went to work, or you went to you go to school, or to pick up some groceries. What bothers you? It could be people don't stand in line, or there's litter on the ground, or, little things that bother you. And you say, oh, what can I do? I'm just one person. I'm not going to be able to make a difference. And you keep going on, but it keeps bothering. So the idea is to stop and think, if that bothers me, what can I do about it? Right? Not just, and most people think, what can I do? They think, I'm one person, I can't make a difference. It's a responsibility of the government, or all the parents these days, they're terrible. Things you cannot control. So the idea is to think, what can you do? I can pick up the litter, right? I can at least never cut the line, or I can nicely tell somebody, you shouldn't cut the line, and so on, whatever. So to focus on what you can do. We have a saying in our culture in Islam, do not belittle any good deed. Little things go a long way. And another saying that says, everyone is a guardian. So this feeling of responsibility that I have to do something. And thirdly, is that you are not responsible for the consequences. When you think I have to change the world, it becomes too big and overwhelming and you just quit. But when you say, what can I do, even if it's very small, and I don't, and that's enough to make me feel I've done something. Oh, you can't imagine what happens. It's like magic. Or in physics, it's the chaos theory, which says when a butterfly flutters its wings, it moves the wind a centimeter. There's a hurricane beyond what we can imagine in time and space. So it's those little things that really count on the long term. And that's why we call it the butterfly effect. So I think if people adopt that mindset, what bothers me, what can I do about it, and start doing it, take an action, things will change. It's like when somebody says, who do you think you are? You're just a drop in the ocean. Well, you can answer back, but what is the ocean but millions and millions of drops? So if each one of us takes that feeling of responsibility, things change. And I'll share with you another story. So we went to a town in the south of Jordan a few years ago to do a Wheel of Reading training. And this woman comes up to me and tells me in this tone of blaming, like, why don't you build us a library? And I said, why are you waiting for me from another city to come and build you a library? If you want one, you should be the one who does it. Well, she takes the training, this woman, from Wheel of Reading. And 6 months later, she invites us for the launching of her physical library. So by the way, Wheel of Reading is not a physical library. It's about reading. It's an experience. It's a living library. It's about reading aloud to the kids. What happened is that she had chosen to start reading aloud in a mosque. The children increased in number 10, 20, 30. She had 75 kids who would come to her reading aloud. There was not enough space in the mosque. So one of the neighbors, who was a local contractor, volunteered to build a whole room to house her library, which became the library of the neighborhood. And all the neighbors came in, brought wood and shelves and paint, and they created their physical library that we went in and visited. This library still exists today. If we had built a library for her, she wouldn't have taken care of it or maintained it. She would have kept on blaming, complaining, demanding. But we flipped it. She and her neighbors created it, and that's why it's still running, because they own it. And this is the beauty, the magic of We Love Reading. And that's what we want. So when we say We Love Reading has spread, I want to say it's not spreading of the program or scaling of the program itself. What we want to do, if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, is scaling of mindsets, of feeling responsible to take action locally, rather than blaming others. And this not only will succeed in creating a better life for the people around us, but it gives personal satisfaction for the person themselves. Because we all seek happiness, and I think and we seek it in money and fame and where we are in society. But really, the real happiness is when you feel you've helped someone else, you've made a difference in someone else's life, and this satisfaction is fundamental to the success of We Love Reading, because that's how people feel. As We Love Reading has spread, it has spread, like I said, in this simple form, because it's based on these shared universal values and this feeling of agency and I can, while fostering locally, the local culture, because you read aloud in your native tongue, you decide what you want to do, where you want to do it, how frequent you want to do it. Nobody's watching over you. You don't have to report to anyone. And you become that champion, that leader in your own community.
Yeah, and I think you've done, when we always talk about networks, someone will come to us and say, right, we've had this idea, we want these people to come together to solve a problem or share opportunities. And then we sort of work backwards in a way. We sort of think, okay, well then, what is our purpose? Okay, what are the mindsets that we need? Where it sounds like you've gone the other way, where it's like, we know what people's mindsets are. How do we build from that? How do we know, like, as you said, people like to feel good. People like to feel that they've got control over something. And so building the program around their own mindset seems to be the successful model here.
Yeah, and I want to comment, this reminds me of a book by Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I urge everybody to read their book. I think one challenge, one thing we're doing wrong in the world is that we think we know what people want. We assume we know what they want. And if they don't, we put ourselves in the kind of savior mindset that we want to tell them what they want. They don't know better, and we want to tell them. That's oppression, equal to oppression of the oppressor in the traditional meaning of the word, where somebody's oppressing someone else. But if I come to somebody and tell them I know what you need and you don't, that's oppression as well. Who am I to know what they want? So the idea is to go where the people are, and for them to demand what they want. And that's that kind of approach and strategy is the one that is sustainable, is the one that really changes a mindset and creates that ownership. Because in the end, you don't want somebody to do just one program. You want them to take responsibility to change their whole world around them, and even beyond your presence. Because most projects around the world, if the funding runs out, everybody goes home and everything goes back to normal. For us, actually, that's when the magic happens, because it's beyond the projects are just about the training, and then the magic keeps going beyond for years ahead. And I think that's how programs should be developed. And one way to do that is that it can't be somebody drawing up or designing a program in an office in New York for somebody in Jordan or Nigeria or Myanmar. It should be the people of Myanmar, people of Jordan, people of Nigeria who are designing for themselves, because they know better what the challenges are, and therefore know better what the solutions are. And because they're designing it, they take responsibility, and inherent in that is ensuring the sustainability of that program. And that's what We Love Reading. I designed it. I'm from Jordan. And now we repeat it. Every person who starts it in their neighborhood, they're redesigning it to adapt to their own environment. And this redesigning locally is what has that built-in feeling of agency and responsibility that keeps it going, that sustainability that we all try to figure out in a magical equation, when it's really very, very simple. It's about trusting people locally to do what they think is best. And that's how you create a network of people who trust themselves first. That's most important. And then start trusting the people around them and working by collaboration within their community, creating bigger and bigger communities around the world, networks of trust, of doers who are changing the world.
And you really hit the nail on the head there. Like, I've worked in development for 12 years now, and if you have to convince a community of a program, it's not going to work, right? If you're already having to convince people, then it's not designed with the people, and you don't have an understanding of the issues and the culture and the potential on the ground there. So I think that really did hit the nail on the head for me. And I think one of the other questions that I've been thinking of, and please do post questions in the chat as we go on, but we've had Teach for All, and we've had Giving Tuesday talking about their networks. And one of the things that they said was, obviously they had an idea, and then the networks go and they take the idea to all of the different places and they run with it in their own way. And so from your perspective, how easy or difficult was that? Because obviously you have an idea of what We Love Reading was for and is about, but that, as you say, that sort of trusting the other communities to take it and run with it their own way, how difficult was it? And then also, what have you seen that you weren't expecting from that?
So it's about letting go and not being controlling for everything. I think that's another problem. We always want to control every little thing. And that comes from a feeling of lack of trust, by the way. If you trust the human being, that they know better, then you just let go and you move with them. And again, that's about removing the power dynamics, and you learn with them. And that's a mindset. Actually, that's a mindset shift. And it's about really living it, not just talking about it. And maybe one example here in my case is that as leader, founder, director, whatever you want to call me for We Love Reading, the mindset of all programming and international NGOs, how can I grow bigger? How can I get more funding to grow bigger? And during COVID, actually, which it was a terrible, terrible time, it still is, but I'm a very optimistic. So I see the silver lining in everything. My husband says I see an ocean in a drop of water. Is that it allowed me to rethink my mindset in my positioning of We Love Reading in the world. And rather than trying to seek more funding and negotiating partnerships on the basis of, I will give you the training, what are you going to, or how can you pay me to use it or license it and so on, I decided to give it out for free. And that's why now We Love Reading is an online training for free in 10 languages and counting. And by that simple shift of mindset, suddenly I found partners and collaborators everywhere, because it wasn't about now the money. It was about how can we work together, trusting. I started trusting the partners rather than thinking it's a transactional relationship. I give you, you give me, or materialistic. It now became a collaboration built on trust. I trust you that you're going to take this and do fantastic things with it. So take it. And if they take it and do fantastic things, I've succeeded. So just shifting my outlook and position opened a whole new world of opportunities and potential that I had never imagined. And now We Love Reading, again, is spreading more. We have a partner who has given us this online platform for unlimited users for the training. The Ministry of Culture in Jordan has launched with us a national campaign for We Love Reading, all because it became a free program online. So hopefully that answers your question of how when you shift your mindset and trust people, that's what becomes the energy, the momentum that keeps it going. And I think that's what we need to go back to, our humanity of trusting in people. And maybe one thing is, how do we use technology? Many times technology is used as a goal in itself, rather than using it as a tool to foster what you want to do with your network. So in our case, we don't use technology to read aloud to kids. We believe in the real book, physical book, the human-human interaction, because for the child's brain to develop, you need the social cues, right? The looking in the eyes, feeling people, sensing, smelling, the closeness, the physical closeness. But we use technology to connect our network around the world for that virtual community that I mentioned earlier. So it becomes a tool for people to engage and talk to each other in a peer-to-peer fashion again. And again, to realize and appreciate that everyone has something to give. That I will learn from you. You have something fantastic that I will learn from. And I think having that mindset, that humbleness, that openness, that trust is what fosters that network to keep going and gives us that wonderful looking forward. Like, oh my God, I'm going to meet somebody new. I'm going to learn something new. And even if the experience turned out to be in some measure or context negative, you're still learning something. And that's fantastic to keep that positive curiosity pushing us forward. Again, so it's all, if you notice, working on this intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation.
Yeah, and as you said before, that is so important for the sustainability, because, you know, if you just sort of say, here's a program, here's an online app, bye, see you later. You know, we've seen this before with many other programs. They don't work because, as you say, people don't feel that they're part of it. They don't, you know, hearing other stories is inspiring, thinking like, oh, this person's doing something the other side of the globe similar to me, and they're also doing these amazing things. You know, that's the thing that keeps people going. And that's why I think, you know, the volunteer aspect of it is incredibly important. So we do have a question here from Roanna. So thank you, Roanna. Thanks for joining us. So the question is, in the absence of tracking progress, how do you demonstrate impact, for example, to donors and people outside the program who aren't on the field seeing the impact, especially in the current misinformation age where what is seen is believed and what isn't seen doesn't exist?
That's a fantastic, great question. Actually, what we do two things. First of all, the way we approach reporting, monitoring, again, it's about sharing, not monitoring, not reporting. And if our We Love Reading ambassadors are so proud of what they're doing, they want to share because it's ownership rather than they are reporting, and we don't want to report, and this is so cumbersome, and oh my God, they want more from us, you know, that kind of jargon, that relationship. And of course it becomes demanding and difficult and people quit. Ours is about share with us. You're our hero. You're the program. Share with us what you're doing so we can celebrate you. We can learn from you. Who doesn't want to talk about their story? Who doesn't want to celebrate their successes? Who doesn't want to talk about what they're doing with others? So it's the same thing. It's just shifting the mindset of how we do things is what creates the positive intrinsic motivation to keep on going. So we have some KPIs, and that's why we want to develop this mobile app so that people can share, and through them we can collect that information and use it. But and like I said, you want to focus not just on some KPIs like where you're reading, how many times you're reading, how many kids are coming. These are simple things that we can collect, but that doesn't mean we've changed people, right? Somebody could chalk up how many times they've read, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a difference. What really matters is the storytelling, and that shows that people have changed from the inside. And so we collect those, we share them in our magazines and our storylines to inspire others. But also we did more. So I'm a scientist, right? And I need to do science. So I invite colleagues of mine from different scientific fields, psychology, education, and to come and study the impact of my program. So they do deep dives of randomized control trials on certain samples of the communities that have been part of We Love Reading. And so it's like they prove the principle through this very rigorous, intensive research. And we publish this in peer-reviewed journals, academic journals, that we later translate into local languages and share with the people giving back. And so that proves the principle. And then we have the storytelling, like I said, across the board of people sharing their work, sharing what they do. So this is the new way of measuring that we believe is much more relevant. It captures what the impact in reality And it has the statistics and numbers, but it's done through this shift in how we do it that all stems from trusting the person, and that we are all learning from each other. So it's a whole new jargon, right? We are using different terms, different approaches, and we hope this will shift the mindset of the whole measurement world, and therefore the funding world, going forward.
Yeah, and that's, we've had some funders on over the past month, and had them listening to people talking about their networks, because I think that's also really essential, is that if we want to create greater impact, then networks are obviously the way to go about that. But it's like you say, we need to flip the model a bit. We need to be listening to the people who are doing these programs, who are helping, put these things together, and listening to how do they measure success. But there's also that element of trust as well still, right? There's a trust between the donor and the network. And so I think there's a lot more to be done around that, and about listening as well. And so do we have another question? Oh, Dennis, you just popped into the chat here. A recent study of the work and lives of young change makers from a survey of 800 social activists from 130 countries across the world reveals major 5 challenges that make these change makers make. Okay. Are you going to share that study with us, Dennis? You're going to pop it in the chat. And lack of funding comes first. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Definitely, it's a bit long, so it was just causing a lot of difficulty trying to type. If you don't mind, maybe I can just engage Rana directly and ask the question, and also share.
Ask away, please do.
Okay, thank you. Good conversation thus far. Thank you, Rana, for the expose and some very, very, quite revealing insights that you shared. So I was just going to talk about this global survey that was done by the Possibilists, right? It had about a lot of youth networks coming together to have a survey all across the world to know what are the challenges that young people face, and most importantly, those major challenges that denies them their agency, or that they feel denies them their agency. So we have lack of personal financial stability coming first for young change makers around the world, risk of burnouts, lack of support, resistance from the environment, experiencing harassment, and the imposter syndrome. So those are more like the 5 basic challenges that we face. Now, when you look at how to fight systemic changes, right, especially as it engages or involves young people, and you find them overwhelmed by this plethora of issues and challenges, it becomes so glaring that without flipping the script, just like you said, their agency can still be easily denied, because the tools, right, that they really need to create that change effectively, structurally or systemically, they have been denied of it, right? So there is no that, level playing ground for them to actually create the change that they desire to create. And I'm talking beyond just mere tokenism, just mere giving them a seat at the table, or just creating a space for them to create change or to effect change, right? So it becomes a challenge of how truly can, young people take charge of this agency? How truly can they effect this change, right? If we are to put consideration into the issues, the difficulties, the baseline difficulties to face. So for me, it's just a question that keeps coming over and over and over again in my work and in my, relations with young people, to see, are we just saying this to be politically correct, just to, just accommodate young people, right? Or how best exactly can we mobilize and galvanize efforts together, looking at these challenges that we have, right, that are structural and that are actually, just what defines the agency, or it defines the individualism of youth, to be able to create this change.
Thank you. That's a very important question, and it's relevant across the world in different communities. Actually, this is how I approach it. one assumes that so things have to be huge and big and results have to come quick. Real change takes time. Changing of mindset takes time. And I think that's the first thing you have to keep in mind, right? And it's about, we have a saying in Arabic, you plant, they planted for us to eat, and we will plant for the future generation to eat. So it's about starting small. As I had said earlier, it's about thinking, what can I do in my little community, in my neighborhood, in my family, in myself, right? As simple as that. And don't think that's too small, that's too simple, I want something bigger. That's where it all starts. It starts from, what can I do? All right, so that's number two. So long-term change. What can I do as a person? And each person has a different journey. We may not see it. It could be one woman who suddenly feels, I can leave the house and go do something. One thinks, oh, that's trivial, but that could be the fundamental phenomenal for that person. So each person has their own journey. Some will go beyond and create huge ripples of change that the world sees, and some will be doing little ripples of change that nobody sees except themselves. And that those both are incredible successes. So again, having that mindset. And thirdly, it's about belief that nothing's impossible, right? We think that, again, that, oh, this is too big and I can't do it. It's about believing that nothing's impossible, and that impossible is something temporary, like Muhammad Ali Clay used to say. Impossible is a word that small men throw out who don't want to be changed, who are scared of change. Impossible is a dare. Impossible is a declaration. Impossible is nothing. And I think having that mindset allows us to go forward and to create change. And what I do in like with my students, again, as I said earlier, I'm a professor at the university. We do this in every class. I tell my students to identify a problem that bothers them in their community and write it down on a notebook. That's it. So they write down what bothers them. And then I tell them, now you think of a solution for that problem. Don't think of changing the law, changing people. Think of a solution you can do, you can make on your own. So they write it down. And then I tell them, now go out into the world and practice that solution that you had suggested that you can do. And I tell them, I don't care if you succeed or not. Just keep a diary of what happens. People ridiculed you, people were sarcastic, people said, oh, you're wonderful, you felt bad, you cried, you were happy. Just write a diary while you try to implement that solution that you came up with. That's it. I call this a community awareness project. And every time I do research on it with my students, each student comes back to me and tells me, I cannot be quiet anymore. I have to speak up. I have to do something. Why? Because they realized little actions can go a long way, and about how they change. See, it's not more about how you change the world. It's about how you have changed, how you have now a mindset of I can, a mindset of I'm not waiting for somebody to change it. I'm going to change it in my own little way. And it's about realizing little steps will lead to bigger changes. But it starts with the small steps. I think if we focus on that, then it's not just me doing it, it's you and everyone. And together, again, it's about that togetherness that we will make a difference in some point in space. So that's the butterfly effect, right? And every human being has something to give, by the way. And as a biologist, each human being is unique. They have their unique DNA. So you're special. Nobody has ever had your DNA before you, or now, or will ever in the future. So you have something unique to give to the world, and that allows you to trust yourself to do something and go forward and become the change maker, or become the butterfly that empowers the butterfly effect of change that will go beyond time and space.
Yeah, and I mean that is a great question, Dennis, because that's what we're trying to talk about in the whole festival, right? How do we make that big change? And you know, Rana makes a great point, individually doing your own thing, and then we come together as a network and we think about what can we do together, and then that changes the mindset of a community, and then we go beyond that. And so it can happen, but it is those small steps, and you know, it does come from you yourself and your mindset, and you know, eventually we are trying to get the other side. We're trying to get funders to listen. We are trying to get governments to listen. But in the meantime, you know, we're already doing that change so that they can see something happening. So sometimes it can feel too huge. Like Beverly and I are here in Nairobi, and we do have a saying here that, you know, you're not going to eat an elephant in one go, right? You have to eat an elephant in small pieces. And so I think that's how we look at these challenges. So yeah, one final question. Perfect. So for those of us who are not embedded within an academic institution, do you have any suggestions on how to reach out to people like colleagues so that we can get that level of principal validation and hopefully get published?
Oh yeah. You mean in terms of, the question is in terms of measuring your impact with other colleagues? So, yeah. Well, it's not easy. You need to court them in a way. So I've been talking about every time you reach out now with the internet and everybody's on Zoom, you could reach out, read, you know, the literature yourself, and then find out who are those people who work and do research on programs that are similar to yours, or things that you want to change, whatever the field is. And you reach out to them with an email and say, I have this program, I'm running it. I'd love to invite you to come and study its impact. I mean, maybe 90% of the time they don't respond, 10% they do, and they say, oh, that's great. And that's it. But then it's in their mind, and you could share with them what's happening, updates, and then eventually they'll find the right PhD student, the right, you know, they have a grant that fits into your program, and then they will start thinking, oh, I want to study this in your program. So it takes years of fostering a relationship. It's all about relationships and building trust, but eventually it pays off. And it's about long-term. Again, things don't happen overnight. It's about trusting and keeping engaging with people. And eventually you get all these scientists lined up to do research on your program.
Yeah, thank you. And Rowana, hopefully that will start to answer some of those questions. So as we're drawing to a close, please do feel free to share in the chat your LinkedIn if you want to connect with people, or any resources that you want to share. And we would just like to thank Rana so much for speaking with us today. I know we've definitely got a lot out of an hour, and I'm sure we probably could have had 2 more hours, because this is definitely a passion of yours and ours. So I'd love to thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. And I'd like to share with others. I mean, people can check our website, welovereading.org, which can be posted in the chat. Also, I wrote a book which actually tells my story again, the storyteller. It's called 5 Scarves, and it was recently put on the World Economic Forum as one of 7 books that every change maker should read. And I can also post that in the chat so people can look it up and read it and share with me their feedback.
Yeah, fantastic. Please do. And yeah, please do read and share, because that would be fantastic. And we would just like to, from Beverly and I and from InHive, we would like to thank everyone who has been involved in this festival. It has been a month long, full of so many amazing conversations, which we hope are the start of something. This festival is supposed to be the start, right? We've had the conversations, we've come together, we want to do what's next. So the what's next, we will be sending out a newsletter and some emails to everyone who has subscribed, but also you can connect with us on our LinkedIn page, our InHive page, our Nexus LinkedIn page, and we also have a website as well. You can also join Nexus. We will be taking on some members in a few months' time. So if you do want to join, then you can join from our website. So without further ado, as we always finish with these calls, we just want everyone to just unmute themselves and say goodbye as they leave, so we get that waterfall of goodbyes. So just unmute and say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.